There was a moment in 2017 where Samsung made you feel like you were living in the future. You'd pick up your Galaxy S8, hold it up to your face in the dark, no button, no fingerprint, no passcode, and it would just unlock. It scanned your eyes. Instantly, it felt like something out of a spy movie, and then Samsung killed it. So what exactly was the iris scanner, and why did Samsung abandon one of the most futuristic features it ever built? By the end of this video, you'll understand the rise and fall of Samsung's iris scanner. Let's get into it. All right, we need to understand what exactly Samsung actually built before we can cover what went wrong, because most people severely underestimated how sophisticated this technology was. Your iris, the colored ring around your pupil, is one of the most unique biological identifiers on the planet, more unique than your fingerprint. Fingerprints have roughly 40 distinct features that biometric systems measure. Your iris has over 200. The probability of two people sharing the same iris pattern is estimated at 1 in 1.2 million for fingerprints, and approximately 1 in 10 to the power of 78 for irises. To put that in perspective, there are estimated to be around 10 to the power of 80 atoms in the observable universe. Your iris pattern is, for all practical purposes, uniquely yours in a way that nothing else on your body is. Samsung didn't invent iris scanning. The technology had existed in high-security government and military applications for years, in those big bulky scanners you'd see in airports or secure facilities. What Samsung did was miniaturize it, make it fast enough for everyday use, and put it in a phone that regular people could buy. The Galaxy Note 7 in 2016 was the first Samsung flagship to feature it, though that phone had its own catastrophic problems that overshadowed everything else about it. The Galaxy S8 in 2017 was where the iris scanner truly arrived on the world stage, alongside the stunning new Infinity display design, and for a moment, it felt like a genuine leap forward. Here's the part that made it so compelling. The iris scanner used a dedicated near-infrared LED and a specialized infrared camera, separate from the regular front-facing camera, positioned at the top of the phone. When you raised the device to your face, that infrared light illuminated your eye in a wavelength invisible to the human eye, and the camera captured the complex pattern of your iris in extraordinary detail. Infrared light was the key. Unlike visible light, infrared penetrates the surface of the eye differently, revealing the full texture of the iris, even in low-contrast conditions. That's why the scanner worked in the dark. It didn't need ambient light. It didn't need you to have the screen brightness cranked up. In a completely dark room, it could read your eye as accurately as in broad daylight. The authentication process itself took roughly half a second. You'd glance at the phone, the LED would pulse, the camera would capture, the on-device algorithm would map and compare, and you were in. No contact required, no smudges, no degradation. Over time, the way fingerprint sensors could wear down. And critically, no way to fool it with a photograph, because a 2D image of your eye doesn't replicate the three-dimensional infrared signature of a real iris. Or at least, that's what Samsung said. Here's where the story takes its first major turn. Just months after the Galaxy S8 launched, and Samsung was still riding the wave of positive press about the iris scanner, a German hacking group called the Chaos Computer Club posted a video that sent shockwaves through the tech community. They had defeated the Samsung iris scanner, and they hadn't used expensive equipment, specialized software, or military-grade technology to do it. They used a camera, a printer, and a contact lens. The method was straightforward. They photographed a person's eye using a digital camera with night shot mode, which captured infrared. They printed that image on a standard laser printer. They placed a regular contact lens over the printed image to add a curved, three-dimensional surface that mimicked the curvature of a real eye, and they held it up to the locked Galaxy S8. It unlocked. The Chaos Computer Club's spokesperson said at the time that if you value the data on your phone, a simple PIN is more secure than the iris scanner. That quote went everywhere. It was devastating. Not because the attack was easy to execute in the real world, it wasn't. You'd need a high-quality photo of someone's eye, a printer, and a contact lens, plus physical access to their locked phone. The average phone thief isn't running that operation. But the symbolism was brutal. Samsung had positioned the iris scanner as the most secure consumer biometric ever made, and it had been defeated with office supplies. Samsung's response was measured. They acknowledged the research, noted the complexity required to replicate the attack in real conditions, and maintained that the iris scanner remained more secure than a fingerprint or PIN for most threat scenarios. Technically, they weren't wrong, but the narrative had shifted. The iris scanner went from feeling like the future to feeling like a gimmick that had been oversold, and that perception damage, once done, is almost impossible to undo. The hacking story got all the headlines, but there was a quieter, more practical problem building underneath it that was equally damaging, and this is the part of the story your competitors never cover. The iris scanner required dedicated hardware, a separate infrared LED, a separate infrared camera. Both of these components took up physical space inside the phone's bezel. detail, specifically in that top section above the screen. And in 2017 and 2018, the most important trend in smartphone design was the elimination of bezels. The iPhone X launched in late 2017 with its notorious notch, a cutout in the display that housed Face ID's array of sensors. Samsung responded with their own Infinity Display push, shrinking bezels dramatically, but the iris scanner hardware needed a certain minimum amount of bezel space to function properly. It needed to sit at a specific distance from your face to capture the right angle. It needed its own illumination source. Every millimeter of bezel that designers removed was a millimeter working against the iris scanner's viability. Meanwhile, under-display fingerprint sensors were maturing. The Galaxy S10 in 2019 introduced an ultrasonic in-display fingerprint reader embedded beneath the screen itself, invisible, requiring zero additional bezel space or external hardware. It was a more elegant solution for a market that was increasingly obsessed with screen-to-body ratio. The iris scanner wasn't just competing with Face ID on security, it was competing with in-display fingerprint sensors on design, and in that fight, it was losing on both fronts simultaneously. By 2019 and 2020, Samsung's biometric story had become genuinely confusing, and confused products rarely survive long. The Galaxy S10 shipped with 3 biometric options: the new ultrasonic under-display fingerprint sensor, face recognition using the regular front camera, and on some models, the iris scanner still hanging on. Users were presented with a settings menu of biometric choices that required explanation rather than just working intuitively, and the face recognition on the S10, which used only the regular front camera, not a dedicated 3D sensor array like Face ID, was not as secure as the iris scanner. It could be fooled by a photograph. Samsung even included a warning in the settings when you activated it, noting that it was less secure than fingerprint or iris recognition. So here was Samsung's flagship in 2020 with 3 different biometric systems, one of which the company itself warned you was less secure, one of which had been embarrassed by a printer and a contact lens, and one of which required precise alignment and a specific distance from your face to work reliably. Compare that to the simplicity of Face ID. One system, one experience, works every time, and you start to understand the strategic pressure Samsung was under. The Galaxy S20 in 2020 dropped the iris scanner entirely. The official line was that the improved ultrasonic fingerprint sensor and facial recognition delivered a streamlined, better overall experience. There was no dedicated segment at Unpacked, no acknowledgement that a feature present on every flagship since the Note 7 was being permanently retired. It was just gone. Samsung's current biometric answer is the ultrasonic under-display fingerprint sensor, paired with 2D face recognition for convenience. And it's worth being honest about what that trade represents. The ultrasonic fingerprint reader is genuinely impressive technology. Unlike optical sensors that simply photograph your fingerprint, ultrasonic sensors use sound waves to map the 3-dimensional topography of your fingerprint ridges. They work with wet fingers. They work with minor cuts or abrasions. They're significantly harder to fool than optical sensors, and with each generation, they've gotten faster. The Galaxy S25's reader unlocks in a fraction of the time compared to early implementations. But is it more secure than the iris scanner? Technically, no. The 200+ distinct measurement points of iris recognition still outclass the 40 or so of fingerprint recognition on a pure data basis. The iris scanner, in ideal conditions against a sophisticated attacker, remains the more robust system. What Samsung traded away in security, it gained in practicality. The under-display sensor works at any distance. It works without precise face alignment. It works when you're wearing a mask, something that became viscerally relevant from 2020 onward in a way nobody had anticipated when the iris scanner was designed. The pandemic, for what it's worth, would have been the final nail in the iris scanner's coffin, regardless of any other factor. A world of masked faces relying on a face proximity biometric would have been a disaster. So, what's the business reality underneath all of this? Well, maintaining the iris scanner required Samsung to keep designing phones with dedicated hardware for a feature that a shrinking percentage of users actively chose to use. Some internal data Samsung has never published, but that analysts have estimated based on survey data, suggests that a significant portion of Galaxy S8 and S9 owners set up the iris scanner once, found it occasionally finicky in bright sunlight or at non-ideal angles, and defaulted back to fingerprint or PIN within weeks. The iris scanner's failure mode was visible and frustrating in a way that made it feel unreliable, even when the underlying accuracy data said otherwise. If it missed a scan, you had to physically reposition your phone and try again. That hesitation, that brief moment of the phone not recognizing you, felt like a product failing even when it was the user's positioning that was slightly off. Consumer perception of reliability matters more than actual reliability statistics, and the iris scanner never won the perception battle. Dropping the hardware freed up internal space, reduced component cost, simplified the biometric software stack, and removed a source of support complaints. For Samsung's engineering and cost teams, it was a clean decision. The product managers had the runway to make it because the S20 was launching with genuinely strong improvements elsewhere: better cameras, stronger performance, an excellent ultrasonic sensor that would absorb the narrative. And just like the microSD slot, Samsung had learned how to retire a feature without making it the story? Here's the question worth asking in 2026, because the answer is more interesting than you'd expect. Could the iris scanner come back? Well, under-display camera technology is maturing. Samsung and other manufacturers are actively developing ways to embed sensors beneath the screen itself, not just fingerprint readers, but increasingly complex optical systems. There's no technical barrier, in principle, to building an under-display iris scanner. The infrared illumination and capture could theoretically be integrated into future display panels the same way fingerprint sensors were. And with Galaxy AI now being positioned as Samsung's biggest differentiator, with features that deeply personalize your device experience, there's a renewed argument for the most uniquely personal biometric possible as the authentication layer. An under-display iris scanner that's invisible, instantaneous, and works without precise alignment would be a genuinely compelling Galaxy-exclusive feature in a market where Samsung is desperate for hardware differentiation. Whether Samsung pursues that path depends on whether they see biometric hardware as a differentiator worth investing in, or whether they've decided the fingerprint sensor and 2D face recognition are good enough for the mass market they're targeting. Given that Samsung just put a privacy display in the Galaxy S26 Ultra to address screen visibility concerns, showing they still care deeply about personal security as a feature, the iris scanner's return is not as far-fetched as its quiet exit might suggest. But for now, it's gone. It was a feature ahead of its time, undone by a contact lens and a printer, squeezed out by the relentless push for thinner bezels, and ultimately retired. Now I want to hear from you. Did you own a Galaxy S8, S9, S10, or Note series phone that had the iris scanner? Did you actually use it regularly? Or did you set it up once and go back to fingerprint within a week? Were you one of the people who genuinely loved it and felt something was lost when it disappeared? Or did you barely notice it was gone? Drop your experience down in the comments because I genuinely want to know how many people actually missed this one. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you check out this one next, where I break down what actually happened to the micro SD card slot on Galaxy phones. It's one of the most interesting shifts in smartphone design decisions in recent years, and once you understand why it disappeared, you'll never look at Galaxy storage the same way again. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.